Part 4, Pulling It Together. Now, dear reader, you have to decide if I've succeeded in my task of answering the question posited by this competition. You must also bear in mind that I'm following Truzy's statement, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proofs. So let us review what I have presented with regards to the initial question. You will recall this was, what is the best available evidence for the survival of human consciousness after permanent bodily death? I would argue that I have presented detailed and in-depth descriptions of how quantum physics, cosmology, neurology, and information science can be applied to answer this question. I would further argue that for most people, the best available evidence is from science, the very science whose analysis of the physical world around us has created the technologies that allow me to type these words on a word processor and to send the completed document in electronic format to you, the judges, on a different continent. Without the discoveries of quantum mechanics, this process would be impossible. In addition, neurological research has given us an insight into the processes by which my brain has pulled together these ideas and how your brains interpret these symbols into ideas and concepts. I have carefully and meticulously explained how several current and widely accepted scientific theories on the true nature of reality can be applied to prove the survival of human consciousness after permanent bodily death. Indeed, although seemingly offering conflicting models, I have shown that both the Copenhagen interpretation and the many worlds interpretation, and its variation, inflation theory, can be used in support of cheating the ferryman. Either consciousness creates reality by collapsing the wave function, or the wave function does not collapse, and we all exist in countless universes in which versions of ourselves experience every possible outcome of every decision we can make. In this regard, may I take the opportunity to quote Alan Guth of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, one of the creators of inflation theory. Quote, "In an internally inflating universe, anything that can happen will happen. In fact, it will happen an infinite number of times. Thus, the question of what is possible becomes trivial. Anything is possible unless it violates some absolute conservation law." Unquote. Indeed, in a recent article in the Scientific American Special Edition, Yasunori Nomura, professor of physics at the Berkeley Center for Theoretical Physics, discussed how Everett's many worlds interpretation and Guth's inflation theory suggest that our universe is one of countless others that exist in what has been termed probability space. In the same article, Nomura has also made an interesting comment about time, again one that is powerfully supportive of the time elements of my CTF model. He states, quote, "The concept of time may be an illusion. It is an emergent concept that arises from a more fundamental reality and seems to exist only within local branches of the multiverse." Unquote. That more fundamental reality being, in my opinion, the digital information field from which the multiverse with all its alternate timelines exists concurrently. In support of this, I have presented evidence of how our subjective perceptual world is created out of data, binary bits, zeros and ones, on and offs. Everything is built up from information. This information creates the illusion of a three-dimensional universe when, in fact, it is all simply a simulation, or more correctly, to use Dr. Andrew Gallimore's terminology, an instantation. This is perceived or processed by our consciousness, which is located in the brain. This is a critical point. One of the major arguments against survival after death is that without a functioning brain, and a dead brain is very non-functioning, consciousness ceases to exist. But CTF overcomes this problem by showing that post-mortem perceptual continuity happens while the processing brain is still alive. This seeming contradiction can be accommodated by the simple fact that time dilates at the point of death. For the observing consciousness, the moment of brain death in objective consensual time is never reached. The person is seen to die in other Everett universe instantations as perceived by other consciousnesses, but not in their own. Interestingly, in 2013, a research team based at the University of Michigan were intrigued to observe that during experiments when rats were humanely killed, at the point of death, there was a surge in the production of certain neurochemicals in the brain. Intrigued by this, the team set up brain scans on 8 anaesthetized rats. 8 rats. The team then stopped the rats' hearts, bringing about the cardiac arrest. They were stunned to discover that all the different regions of the rats' brains became synchronized. All the different wave frequencies across the brain showed a phenomenon known as coherence. This is an astonishing discovery. Rats are selected for their experiments because the neurochemical processes are similar as all higher animals, including man. Therefore, if it happens in a rat's brain, a similar process is possible in a human brain. As the team stated in the abstract of the paper, quote, high-frequency neurophysiological activity in the near-death state exceeded levels found during the conscious waking state. This data demonstrates that the mammalian brain can, albeit paradoxically, generate neural correlates of heightened conscious processing at near death. Unquote. So something extraordinary happens in the brain at the point of death, something that involves it needing to generate neural correlates of heightened conscious processing. Could this be the massive uploading of the information required to create the virtual reality-like perceptual environment needed to cheat the ferryman? This may be pure speculation on my part, but something definitely takes place, and it does not seem to give any evolutionary advantage. Science presents powerful objective support for any hypothesis. However, of equal importance is subjective support. We are discussing here a subjective experience that involves feelings and sensations. These cannot be shared with others, and yet in the final analysis, all we can ever really know is our own experience of things. If CTF has validity, it must also be something that human beings have felt or sensed over millennia. And this does seem to be the case. I have presented evidence from philosophy and theology that people simply perceive that they have lived this life before, from déjà vu to precognition, and from panoramic life reviews to subjective time dilation during times of stress. The pieces are there to be joined together. But what is the purpose of such perceptions and experiences? Above, I made the point about evolutionary advantage regarding the brain's activity observed by Borgingin's rats. Nature is parsimonious. It works on the simplest, most economical way. To evolve a set of neurological activities as the organism ceases to exist and therefore cannot act upon or learn from, what these activities engender? It is simply wasteful and pointless. If CTF is correct, then it must serve as an evolutionary purpose, and I believe it does. If we believe that we are more than simply an assemblage of cells that have become sentient, or a tool whereby DNA reproduces itself, then to live just one life is a reflection of futility. As the great Spanish philosopher Miguel de Unamuno wrote in his 1910 masterwork, The Tragic Sense of Life, quote, "Why do I wish to know whence I come and whither I go? Whence comes and whither goes everything that environs me? And what is the meaning of it all? For I do not wish to die utterly, and I wish to know whether I am to die or not definitely. If I do not die, what is my destiny? And if I do die, then nothing has any meaning for me." Unquote. This sense of nihilism stimulated Friedrich Nietzsche to suggest his model of the eternal recurrence, the idea that we are doomed to live the same life repeatedly. Initially, he argues that this is incredibly depressing and pointless. But when he realizes that we all knew that we were going to live this life over and over again, we would, in this life, ensure that each decision we make and actions we take are thought through and considered, and in doing so, we force ourselves to be as good as we can possibly be. CTF offers a way out of both Unamuno and Nietzsche's scenarios by applying the implications of the multiverse model, whereby, to quote Alan Guth again, anything that can happen in fact will happen an infinite number of times. CTF is not Nietzsche's eternal recurrence, but more like a version of the movie Groundhog Day, a groundhog life, as the title of the Russian language edition of my first book suggested. In this movie, the central character, TV weatherman Phil Connors, finds himself living the same day, February the 2nd, the eponymous Groundhog Day, over and over again. He's caught in a time loop with only him being aware of the fact. All the other characters simply change in response to Phil's comments and actions. Being a fairly self-centered individual, he realizes that there are no consequences to his actions, and he embarks upon days of hedonistic excess. He uses his information gleaned from over previous days to try and seduce his producer, Rita. He is consistent in this endeavour and sinks into depression. He then kills himself a number of times, only to discover he wakes up, and it's the same day. But as the day rolls into each other, he realises that this is a huge gift. As each day starts, he carries within his memories of all the information gleaned over all the other days. This allows him to learn foreign languages, how to play various musical instruments. He has moved from selfishness to self-improvement. He then becomes much more sensitive to others. He develops empathy, and in doing so attempts to help others without expecting anything in return. He runs around the town using his foreknowledge to stop people from being injured. He discovers that the one thing he cannot do is stop people from dying. He finds that he has genuinely fallen in love with Rita. After realising this, he wakes up the next day to find it's February the 3rd. I have been informed by Danny Rubin, the original scriptwriter of Groundhog Day, that he imagined Connors repeating the day 3,652,500 days. 10,000 years. According to Buddhist beliefs on reincarnation, after that specific number of turns of the potter's wheel, the dukkha, the soul can progress to nirvana, or in Connor's case, February the 3rd. In Hinduism, the state of self-understanding that is gained after many turns is called Atma-Jnana. In the CTF model, this is when the Eidolon, with the assistance of the daemon, has lived the perfect life. This is analogous to modern first-person video games in which the game player, daemon, guides their on-screen avatar through many games, and therefore many failures that usually involve the avatar being killed, until the game is successfully completed. At this point, the game ends and the daemon moves on. So it is with CTF. After many lives, the daemon assists the Eidolon to live the perfect life. The two then unify and become what I call the dyad, a unitary being consisting of the daemon and the Eidolon in one consciousness. It is the dyad that moves into nirvana or samsara. It is important to note that all these turns of dukkha take place in the final moment of life, that second between life and death while the brain is still functioning. This is not life after death, but life outside of time. I would like to argue that this is the reason for existing. To reach samsara and move on to another level of existence, in effect being allowed to actually die and fall back into the singular oceanic consciousness that goes by many names, for example Brahman in Vedanta, the body of essence in Buddhism, Sat Nam in Sikhism, the Or Ein Sof in Judaism. But this is pure speculation. With regards to this essay, I would like science to be the final arbiter, not belief. Epilogue. In this final section of what has become an extensive essay, I would like to go back to the most crucial area of my proof of CTF, the CTF hypothesis. 3 cases from academic and medical journals that fell under the radar because they were simply dismissed because of lack of appreciation of their true significance. These are 4 cases that I discovered quite by chance. I cannot help but wonder how many more are missed through lack of understanding and the absence of a framework by which they can be categorized. I am hopeful that this essay may bring this to the fore for many other similar cases. A 2003 paper published in the academic journal Psychopathology describes the case of a 23-year-old male temporal lobe epileptic known as SN, who was convinced that he was living his life between the ages of 21 and 25 at least 6 times. Here SN gives a harrowing description of his world. Quote, "Up until the age of 25, my life was unremarkable. I was employed and often enjoyed going to drives or to karaoke with my friends on weekends. I cannot remember the details. At the age of 25, I married a girl from Hiroshima and I lived safely. Nothing particular happened after my marriage. However, soon after I noticed that I was again 21. I was again 21 years old and unmarried. Then I lived again the ages between 21 and 25. Once again I held the same job, and again at the age of 25 I married the same girl. This endless cycle has already repeated itself 5 or 6 times. Now I am sure I will continue forever. I attempted suicide to escape this endless repetition." End of quote. 3 years before, in 2000, another Japanese academic paper reported a disturbingly similar case involving a young woman who was suffering from temporal lobe epilepsy caused by meningitis. She reported that she was perceiving powerful precognitive déjà vu sensations, and they were convincing her that, quote, "the happenings here are exactly the same as those which I dreamed before," unquote. This woman reported that she was experiencing these delusions several times a day. Yet again, the subjective evaluation of what was taking place is totally ignored because the authors are sure that what she was reported was simply a delusion. In 1985, Dr. Bertalan Petho of the Society of Research of Endogenous Psychosis in Budapest reported a case of a 25-year-old woman who also believed that she had lived this life before. This delusion had continued for 12 years. Petho proposed that the woman had shown no signs of schizophrenia. This was a totally new syndrome he termed chronophrenia. The woman, known as Barbara, also believed she was telepathic. She heard an inner voice that involved itself in her life. However, it is her opinion regarding the permeability of her own future, one that she had, according to her own beliefs, lived before, that intrigued Petho. Here he describes one particular discussion. Quote, on another occasion, when it was mentioned that she might possibly go to see the 1976 Olympic Games, in reply to my question about whether the future had already happened to her, she replied, yes, but the question is on what level. I have experienced not one future, but several different ones. It could happen that I will go to the 1976 Olympics. I have a memory of it, but I also have a memory when I won't go to the 76 Olympics. So that memory won't come back to me. Unquote. This suggests that for Barbara, all other human beings make decisions, and as such, any one life will be different from the previous ones simply because an aggregation of decisions made by billions of human beings scores of times a day will radically change the scenario for each new life. Indeed, one could extrapolate and include all historical decisions made before the observer was born. In this way, each life can be seen as the outcome of a brand new set of prior conditions. My final case, reported in 1986 in the Letters to the American Journal of Psychiatry editor section, is a classic of its type, and one I would like to end this essay. This is significant for a number of reasons, which will become clear as you read it. Please bear in mind all the points I have made in this essay, and note how they are supported. The person in question was a 36-year-old woman who had a history of schizophrenic episodes. She had been uncooperative with her co-workers and was referred to the letter's author, psychiatrist Dr. Jerome M. Schneck. I'd like to quote him in full. Quote, the patient spontaneously revealed the delusion, italics mine, she harboured that she relived her life from moment to moment each day, week, month and year. She did not claim that she had lived other types of lives in the past or that she would relive this one exactly in the future after her death, but she insisted that this life was a thorough duplication of her past life. She denied experiencing reincarnation in the sense of having previously lived in some way or form, nor did she necessarily expect a reincarnation in the future. Her experiences were not the usual well-known déjà vu, but the reliving of a lifespan in specific and exact sequence, one event after another in proper order. She claimed her ability to foretell events because of her living often frightened her as well as others, but she asserted that her recollections were valid and accurate, even for the time periods in infancy that are not ordinarily remembered. Unquote. I would like to end this essay with one final piece of objective proof that CTF may have validity. If we go back to our birth at the end of our life, this suggests a circularity, a moving back in time. This should be evidenced physiologically as a person approaches death. Clearly in accidents or illnesses this may not be seen, but if a person lives to an old age and the body is allowed to prepare for a natural death, then physiological changes reflecting a moving back in time may be seen, and this does seem to be the case. In a paper published in 1999, researcher Barry Reisberg resurrected the term retrogenesis in specific relation to Alzheimer's disease. He meant that Alzheimer's is a reversal of the developmental process during infancy and childhood. In effect, the Alzheimer's patient is going backwards in time and approaching birth from another direction. In his patients, he noticed an almost perfect reversal mirroring regarding the development of an infant and the decline of a dementia patient, specifically in cognition, coordination, language, feeding and behaviour. Such was the power of Reisberg's retrogenesis that a process of caring for Alzheimer's patients has been devised in which the carer applies the mother-infant relationship to the patient, and this has been very successful. The most curious thing is that the decline of dementia does not stop at the point of birth. Regarding the mirroring effect of infancy, it continues reflecting a reversal of the embryo's development in the womb. The person becomes silent and unmoving and starts to echo the fetal position of hands and legs curled and the back bent forward. This seems to suggest a journey back to birth, an overlapping of two states that can be found at the start and end of life, exactly mirroring what I suggest in Cheating the Ferryman. Or, as the great Irish playwright Samuel Beckett had his character Pozo observe in his play Waiting for Godot, quote, "They give birth astride a grave. The light gleams an instant, and then it's night once more," unquote. I leave it to you, the judges of this competition, as to whether I have made my case and passed the proof tests demanded in a court of law. The plural of anecdote is not evidence in science, but it is in judicial procedures. I have presented numerous corroborated witness statements involving precognitions and future memory. If these are to be accepted, then the scientifically based forensic explanation must be supplied. This I have done. Not only have I presented extensive material from physics, cosmology and neurology, but also I have used this material to present a logical, consistent and rational explanatory framework. Furthermore, I have also isolated motive, in that I have demonstrated the reasons why such a scenario may have been created. Whatever you decide, the evidence presented undoubtedly points us in the direction of a broader and deeper research into the hypothesis I call cheating the ferryman. Anthony Peake, July 2021.